Okay, the title, Professor of Constitution Goes to War Against It. And it was a great column that was picked up at Real Clear Politics, but of course it originated from the Richmond Times-Dispatch, where A. Barton Hinkle writes such fine pieces. And, sir, great to talk to you.
Hey, it's very nice to be with you. Thanks.
Well, I appreciate that. Okay, I mean, you make such great points in this piece. And, you know, it takes me back to the sound bites that I would play while Obama was running for president the first time, where he would talk about, you know, things that he had said in the past and how the Constitution is a flawed document, and how many times as president he has said, you know, that the Constitution is an impediment to him doing what he wants to do. So it really shouldn't shock us, even though these scandals and what he has done are pretty shocking. I'm not all that surprised.
Yeah, well, I'm not the first to say this, but maybe the only good thing to come out of the scandal so far is that we finally found a part of the Constitution that the Obama administration likes, the Fifth Amendment.
And they couldn't get that right either, could they?
No, I couldn't get that right either, but oh well.
So talk about. I mean, you go up. You know, you talk about what Obama did in his first term, and you take it through to the scandals. And I want to focus on the IRS in a second when you get to that. But you know, what made you write this piece? The irony of a constitutional law professor, you know, trampling the Constitution in your view in this manner.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like those water park buckets that they fill up and they fill up and they fill up, and finally it tips over, and that's just sort of what happened to me. You know, all the stuff just kept pouring in, and eventually it had to spill out into a column. You know, the Cliff Notes version of what I was trying to point out was that, for the most part, as a general rule, and there are exceptions, but as a general rule, conservatives tend to be very much in favor of economic liberty, and they're a little bit less concerned with the civil liberty side of things. Liberals or progressives tend to be more concerned about civil liberties, and they tend to want to restrict economic liberty. And what we have now is a president who's hostile to both kinds of liberty, and he's gone farther in both regards than any president in recent memory. Yeah, and you start off by talking about the Obamacare as well. Yeah, well, you've got Obamacare and the individual mandate, which is the biggest expansion of federal power over the individual in a long time. It's an unprecedented expansion. It also, through the contraception mandate part of Obamacare, you know, infringes on religious liberty in the First Amendment. And, of course, that's not the only attack on the First Amendment from this administration by any stretch, but the president has pushed tax cuts by which he takes more control over private economic resources directly. He's pushed a slew of big regulations through by which he takes more control of private economic resources and decisions indirectly. And so the result is that government's not only taking more of your money, but it's telling you how to spend what's left. Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, let's fast forward to the scandals here, and of course Rosen and the IRS. But you know, you talk about the IRS specifically, and you talk about how it's not just, you know, the groups, the conservative groups, but it was individuals as well, including a very prominent supporter of Mitt Romney, who alleged that they were targeted by this administration or by the IRS too. Yeah, I could buy the defense that the targeting of Tea Party groups was an isolated case in which low-level employees, you know, went rogue. And you know, parenthetically, I'd mentioned it's always funny how in Democratic administrations some things go wrong and it's low-level employees going rogue. But when something in a Republican administration like Abu Ghraib happens, the immediate question is, well, how far up did this go? Right, right. Yeah, but you were talking about Frank Vandersloot and I could say that the Cincinnati argument would hold some water if it weren't for the fact that guys like Frank Vandersloot support Romney, and all of a sudden he's getting audited not only by the IRS but also by federal agencies. There's you know, there was a lady in Texas, Catherine Engelbrecht. She started a Tea Party group, and all of a sudden she's getting attention not just from the IRS but from the FBI and OSHA and alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. You know, the EPA is giving preferential treatment to Freedom of Information requests from liberal groups, waiving the fees for those requests, which can run into a lot of money. When conservative groups ask for the same treatment, they get turned down in the large majority of cases. So there's a pattern here which suggests that, while there might not be a smoking gun memo lying around saying let's go after conservative groups, there's certainly a culture in this administration that tolerates that kind of behavior.
And 157 visits by the former head of the IRS compared to one visit in the Bush administration to the White House by the head of the IRS. Now the promotion of one of those so-called rogue Cincinnati workers to a higher level position within the IRS, which is kind of in your face. Where do you think this will all end?
To be honest with you, I'm not real good at predicting the ways of Washington. It'll probably end up with some congressional hearings and, a couple people get books out of it, and eventually it will all, unfortunately, blow over, is my guess if I had to make one.
Well, I think if we had a fair media, as you kind of alluded to earlier, that if it was a Republican, I think if we had a fair media, this wouldn't be allowed to blow over, and hopefully it will not. But I thank you for the time. A. Barton Hinkle, who was a editor and a columnist at the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Thank you, sir.
Hey, great to talk to you.
You too. Take care.